Now, when it comes to defining your page in Word, we are in charge. Now, it may be that so far you've used Word, you've opened Word, you've got a plain document, and you've gone and manipulated and used that plain document. However, the plain document that you get is driven by a template, and it has a set size, so it has a set paper size, it has a set page orientation, and it has a set margin. Now, we can control all those settings either for the current document or for the default document, so that then going forwards, that becomes the new template, the new base for new documents. So if we start with a new document, which we get when we start Word anyway, we can control the paper size, the orientation and the margins from the page layout ribbon. So all of those items that we require are on the page layout. They're even at the beginning of the page layout. This is the size option, and we click the drop down, and it gives us some standard sizes. The current size of the document is highlighted, so we can see letter is actually highlighted, but we could change it to tabloid, legal, executive, A3, A4, B4, B5, envelope, envelope monarch, or we can go into more paper sizes where we can choose from a set of options in a list, or we can choose custom size and actually put in our own size of paper. Now, obviously that paper size needs to match the printer that you're aiming for at the end of the day. Or if you're going to output to PDF, it needs to be a sensible size to PDF so people can see the document, review the document, and potentially print the document. So we're going to stay with letter, but we could change it to any other. Now, if you're changing the paper size and you want that change to be forever, so all future documents, this will not be retrospective. It will not affect documents you've already created, but it could affect all future documents. Then you simply click this button here, Set as Default. If I click that now, it tells me that this change will affect the normal template, and the normal template is the one that drives all blank new documents. So if I say yes, all my future documents will be letter. Now, from the same ribbon, we have the option for orientation, and there's only two orientations, portrait or landscape. So do you have the paper on its end or on its side? And we can change between the two very simply. If, again, you want to change the default orientation, then we actually need to go into the page setup dialog, so into this little option here, then onto the margins tab, and here's the difference between portrait and landscape. So I could change that to landscape, click the set as default, and it will change all of my future blank documents in Word to be landscape. Ordinarily, we're used to portrait for all of our documents, such as letters and legal documentation, but from time to time, you may want to create a landscape document. So I'm not going to change the default, but I'm going to change this current file. So that changes this one to landscape. The margins, so that's the non-printable area, are set through the little drop down here. Now there are some pre-built margins, and you can see the default we have here is normal, which is an inch on either side. So an inch at the top, an inch at the bottom, and an inch on the left and the right. We also have narrow, which removes everything down to half an inch. If I choose that, you can see that the page rulers all shrink to half an inch all round, and the cursor is now closer to the left-hand side and the top side. We can choose moderate, which has an inch at the top and the bottom, and the left and the right are 3/4, wide, which has 2 inches at each side, or mirrored, which is useful if you're printing double-sided. Or we can go into custom margins, which takes us into the page setup dialog box on the margins tab and actually set our top, left, bottom and right margins manually to be any value we like between 0 and the page width really. You also have an option to add a gutter. Now a gutter is useful because it extends the margin area effectively where you may wish to hole punch or staple the document once it's printed. Now if we change the margins, I might change the top to be 0.7 and the bottom to be 0.7 and the left to be 0.6 and the right to be 0.6. And I want that to now become the default, then I come down to the bottom left-hand side and click Set as Default. Now that will also set the landscape as default, so I'm going to go back to Portrait, Set as Default. This will affect the normal template, yes, and all my future documents will now have these slightly smaller margins than the default that comes with Word, which is an inch all round. You must have some margin, mainly for printing because the paper has to be held by the printer, but also for readability. How hard would it be to read a document that was printed totally from one edge to the next edge and from the top edge to the bottom edge? It would just fill the paper with text. Whereas having the margin gives you some white space in the document for the printer to hold the paper, for you to hold the paper, and just to give the text some area to breathe. So this initial setup for your document is done on the page layout ribbon, and we've been able to change the page size, the orientation and the margins, either for the current document, or if we use the set as default option that we see in the page setup down here, then that will be all future documents that you create from scratch in Word.